This is how to start and run a law firm. I'm Mark Lyda. My guest today is a self-described serial entrepreneur. Andrew DiPaolo had an entire career in corporate America and doing side hustle, entrepreneurial projects. He went to law school at night and never intended to use it, and at one point just said, well, I've got this law degree. I think I'll go start a law firm, and then that became his career. He's now come full circle and has joined a larger national firm. So we're going to hear about his entire journey. Lots of actionable stuff in here for you. Let's dive in. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you, Mark.
All right. So tell us the story. Tell us the story of your journey as a serial entrepreneur to a law firm founder.
Sure. I'll give you the somewhat condensed version here, but there's the serial entrepreneur side of my life, and then there's the corporate side. So I entered the workforce in 2006, and I had a corporate job. In fact, I worked in oil and in infrastructure for about 17 years. During the course of that 17 years, outside of my main employment, I started multiple companies, and I'll talk a little bit about those. But most of the time, I started out as a commodities trader that eventually developed into various types of analyst positions, and then into infrastructure development. So I used to build oil pipelines.
Where were these? These were in Texas?
No, these are all based out of Denver, but
All based
a
out
lot
of Denver.
Yeah, but some of them were Fortune 100 companies that I was in their Denver office. So large publicly traded entities, and I did. I basically was working with attorneys the entire time, but was not acting as an attorney. Was not an attorney because I didn't go to law school until much later. So, so that was that was the start. Was I had a corporate job, and I during the course of my corporate gig, I also had sort of side gigs that I started, little companies here and there. Some were bigger, and more interesting than others. But I had one that was, call it, press related. The closest thing that I could think of would be the Westward, but not nearly to that size. And it was a small, sort of mountain-oriented, kind of Westward style online newspaper, effectively.
So Westward, if you're listening and you're not from Denver, it's our alternative weekly newspaper.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
okay. Cool. Go on.
But oriented kind of towards the mountain towns. That was a lot of fun, but it didn't. It just ultimately couldn't produce much revenue, and so that shut that down. Moved on to the next project. Eventually, I got involved in an accessories company, so small package goods and accessories related to clothing, and so what's interesting too is that from a business perspective, you're learning all of these different industries, and it also makes it interesting from a legal perspective, because having had all this exposure, I have a client that comes in and says, I want to start a company and I have this product, and I'm like, you know what, I've been there, so let's go, because I've done it myself, right?
Totally.
And so I had a company that did that. That company still exists. I got out of it a number of years ago. The next company I started was a drone UAV inspection company. And
wait, actually, so are you saying that company, the accessories company, still exists? You started it and it still exists?
Yeah, I was
Cool.
I was heavily involved in it. I made it what it became, and then I got out of it. Just, I guess,
Cool.
if anybody who is listening to this wants to be a transactional attorney, you'll find out that there's lots of reasons people come and go from businesses, and this is probably one of those marquee reasons. It's just, it was time for me to exit, so I did. But but it was, all of these were incredible learning experiences and kind of built up my confidence level. And frankly, really fold into my current practice area, because right now I do mainly business transactions, and I buy and sell businesses, everything from the small entity to, kind of upper mid cap. And that's the bulk of the work that I do, and all in conjunction with kind of general in-house or risk structuring, from a corporate perspective. And all of these, entrepreneurial experiences really flow into that. So,
Oh, yeah, I could see clients loving that. This podcast is presented by Practiced, modern law practice management software. We built Practiced at my firm because we were tired of fighting our software. Workarounds, clunky systems, way too much admin. So we built our own, and it cut our admin time by over 70%. Practiced makes running a law firm feel lighter. Intake is fast. Engagement letters just work. Time, tasks, and expenses stop piling up. And Practiced's AI assistant can do anything a human assistant can do inside the system. You can also hand it your messy notes, forms, or questionnaires, and it generates clean, polished documents using your templates. Or just forward an email and a new matter appears. Practiced even helps you get more clients through marketing and advanced referral network features. Everything works right out of the box, no separate software for intake and case management, one system, no duct tape. And it's just $20 a month. All features, no add-ons, no nickel and diming. Get started in minutes at practiced.io. That's practist.io. By the way, I didn't mean to interrupt or derail. You were actually telling us about your next business after the accessories business.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Because I spent a lot of time in the oil, I call it the oil patch. This was right at the advent of drones becoming a thing. So a buddy of mine and I started a drone inspection company. We were probably about 3 years ahead of where it would have been a very successful entity. The idea was good. The technology was not there yet for what we were trying to accomplish. And
that happens.
But now it is. It's kind of amazing the leaps and bounds that have happened on the physical side and the technology side of what they're doing with drones and drone inspections. But it was definitely related to like the oil patch, and that was actually kind of fun because you had I had to do a lot of research on regulatory issues, and this was there's been a lot of regulations that have come out, and other kind of case law related to drones and flying drones and not being able to see them or being able to see them, and this was ahead of all that. So but there was nothing. There was really not much out there when you started doing it, which was fascinating. And so anyway, I did that, and all the while I had been working in these various corporate positions, and was a senior director at a pretty big oil company, and I finally just got to a point where I said, you know what, I'm kind of done with the being in the mix on the big corporate side for a variety of reasons, and kind of came to a point where I started a law firm. And I was like, that's going to be the next thing. And instead of being a side business, it was going to be the main business.
And you had to go to law school to do that. So like, did you decide first, I'm going to start a law firm, and then like, okay, well, the first step to starting a law firm is I've got to go to law school? Is that how you did it?
No, I never intended to be a lawyer. I never intended to be a practicing lawyer. So I went to law school for a different set of glasses. I had been caught on the sharp end of the transactional stick for a long time, and I worked with attorneys day in and day out. And one of my biggest pieces of feedback for most attorneys is the fact that they don't understand the business that they are practicing law in. And eventually, over time, they get it. And Mark, as well as I do, we can write documents all day long. And do we really need to understand the business to write a I don't know, membership interest purchase agreement? Probably not. However, when you start doing some of the work that I do, which involves, like I call it fractional general counsel, or, that type of role for businesses where, they bring you their legal problems and you try to either find them the expert that they need or solve them for them. Actually understanding the business and where they fall, as far as risk goes, is really important. I tell all these businesses, I'm like, you know what, there's a continuum of risk out there, and we need to understand where you are on that continuum of risk to be able to start doing anything about it. And to be able to understand that, you actually need to understand the business itself. And I will tell you, a number of my clients were floored by the fact that I wanted to show up on site. One of the first times that happened, I was like, well, hey, let's go visit your warehouse. This is to a new client. And they're like, wait, you're going to come to us? But like, you're the attorney. Don't you live downtown in your ivory tower?
Right.
And I was like, no, I want to see what you're dealing with. And so, I mean, the things that I was able to take away from that experience was, one, I understand exactly how their goods flowed through their operation. Two, I understood the employment level risk, and saying, all right, you've got employees using, various types of heavy loading machinery. You have employees on ladders. You have employees doing, taking, pallets off of, third story racks here. All right. Like, it's not 100% integral, but like when you start trying to understand the risk profile of a business, you need to see that stuff. And it actually goes a long way to where when your client picks up the phone and said, hey, I had a slip and fall, or maybe it's not a slip and fall. Maybe I had a customer issue, right? At least you know how the goods flow through the business, and
right.
And effectively like kind of what their business setup feels like. So
for you personally, so then did you go to DU law at nights while you were working in the corporate world and doing side hustles?
Yes.
Wow. So then you got your degree, and then eventually you're like, well, I have this thing. Let's go start a law firm.
Pretty much. Yep. And what one of my side hustles, which is not, I don't know, really, it's a very important side hustle to me. And I started out as a volunteer, and now I get paid these days for it, but I also ski patrol. So I was also able to maintain that through law school, and I still do that. And that actually led to one of my favorite clients, which is I represent some ski patrol unions in negotiating with their corporate clients. So
yeah, great. Yeah, I didn't mention your geography, I suppose, in your bio, but it sounds like you split your time between, what is it, Carbondale and Denver, but you're involved with like the Glenwood Springs bar as well, and board of directors of the Colorado Animal Rescue in Glenwood Springs, right? So you kind of split your time between the high country and Denver?
Correct.
Cool. Okay, so by the way, I received the advice one time, or maybe I heard it at a CLE or something. A business lawyer like you said, it's good for the client dynamic if you make the client come to you for the initial meeting so that they don't have, I guess, too much of a feeling of power or something. I don't know if that's true at all. And I suppose he was just saying that for the first meeting, but I completely agree with you that it's really helpful to go see your client's business. It's also fun because I was one practicing in more of the corporate world before starting my own firm. And it's just a lot more fun to actually know your clients and be able to sort of roll up your sleeves and visit them and develop a relationship with them. So that's really cool. I think that's a great approach. I recommend that as well.
But part of that too is like, I mean, I understand what that person might have been, kind of intending, but at the end of the day, we as lawyers have a very bad reputation, like for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
Everyone likes to blame lawyers, and it could be, well, we're going to blame the lawyer because the cost went up. We're going to blame the lawyer because, everything is going slow. It was going fast until the lawyers got involved, right? Or I don't want to call the lawyer because it's going to cost me an arm and a leg, right? And part of my goal is to break down the wall between us and our client.
Yeah.
And I joke with my clients, but in all seriousness, I tell my clients, I'm like, look, I'm not going to charge you for the question. I'm going to charge you for the answer. And the point being is that I don't want them afraid to call me, which happens a lot with small businesses because they think as soon as they get on the phone with me that the meter starts running. And, in some cases, like we're actively working on the project. Yeah, that's how we get paid, and that's important. And it's important to keep your time. But at the same time, it's also very important that your clients are not afraid to pick up the phone and call you, because it's so much easier to get ahead of something and to point them in the right direction rather than have to fix something. It's more costly to fix something.
It saves them a lot of money in the long term. Okay, so I want to talk about this fractional general counsel business model. This is probably as much for me as it is for our listeners, but do you do that in sort of a subscription type model? And if you do, we've always found that sort of a tough nut to crack, because when we've tried a subscription, like where it's a recurring monthly payment with clients, the difficulty we've had is if they don't use it one month, they won't the next month's work or something like that, or they'll want a refund for months they didn't use. And we try to set those expectations, but we haven't really cracked the nut, solved the mystery of how do we keep clients happy in a subscription model. So share with us your experience dealing with fractional general counsel.
So let me describe the work that I do. And I would say I'm more like legal triage. Clients, who I have a relationship with, brings me the problem, and I either say, sure, we can deal with that, or no, I need to pass you on to my litigator. I need to, we should get employment counsel for this. Like, we need, whenever we need regulatory counsel, something like that I am just not going to do. Right. And that's an important part of knowing your limits and what your practice area would be. Right. There's one of the questions on your list was what was your biggest fear, and what was biting off more than I can chew. And I definitely did that at the beginning, because I wanted to say yes to everything. And sometimes that is just not the best answer. But when we start getting into subscription model, and I want to, I'm sure you probably do this on your legal advice or at the beginning of your podcast, but nothing on here is actually legal advice. But I'm assuming that there's going to be lawyers beyond Colorado that are going to listen to this. And so I think that there's the most important thing you can do if you're investigating a subscription model is to look at your code of ethics. Some codes of ethics are more friendly to it and some are not. And navigating fee for services is something that there should be law articles. I know CBA has done a few on these subscription models, and it's a difficult thing because I believe even technically in Colorado there's no such thing as a non-refundable retainer or something like that. So you're kind of navigating this line between, okay, well, you're paying me to basically get bumped to the beginning of the line, and I'm folding out space in my month for doing that. And I think that you have to be diligent probably in documenting a lot of those things. So I used to do that. I don't currently have a subscription model. I just have regular clients that I'm their first call, and part of that is ultimately I've built a relationship, and I have clients that doesn't really matter. I'm going to be their first call for anything.
Right. And at a certain point, then the old-fashioned billable hour kind of sometimes becomes the best option, and even the most client-friendly option if they trust you and they know I can get this done in like a point one, and it might be the only thing I need this month, a tenth of an hour bill.
Right.
So it's kind of funny how that old fashioned method, if you have the right client trust in these ongoing relationships, can sometimes be the most client friendly way of billing
Yeah.
as well. Sometimes.
I think so. The other thing too is depending on the size of your client, sitting down with them and working out a realistic budget. I mean,
Yeah.
entrepreneurs are really energetic. They're really smart people. And if that's the group that you're dealing with or established businesses, they should have forward-looking financial statements. And if they don't, make it a part of your practice to recommend that they should have some level of forward-looking
Yeah.
financial statements. And I would say, in my experience, uh, the hardest group to work with in regards to this is probably nonprofits, because I charge nonprofits. I think that pure pro bono work is very, very difficult because nobody actually appreciates it who receives it. So I like people. I will do like kind of low bono work,
Mhm.
but I want them to have a certain level of skin in the game, and I want them to plan for the expenses that they may have, and that applies to any
Mhm.
business, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit. So I think it's important
Yeah.
to just sit down and work with your client and say, like, look, you know what? You should put, if it's a super small business, put 2,500, put $5,000 on the books as legal expenses. And if you don't pay it, great. But at least it's
Right.
there from a planning perspective. And if we have a big month because we have to, because some new legislation came out, we got to redo a bunch of your contracts, or, we just had some, disputes or something like that, then,
Right.
then you've at least planned for it.
Right. Right. What you have there, by the way, this is kind of uh, woven into what you've been saying in all your story along the way, is you have what they call in tech circles founder market fit. So I would urge anybody listening to this to think about, when you're choosing a practice area to focus on for your new firm, why you, and why would a client choose you in particular, for this practice area. I think you, Andrew, are a really good example of, like, if I were a small business owner, I would want to go to you, somebody who understands how small businesses run and has been there himself. So think about your story as an entrepreneur, and as a human first, and how that lends itself to the practice area you choose, I think, because clients want to know those stories, and it really helps reinforce their decisions and guide their decisions about which lawyers to choose. By the way, you mentioned the questions that I sent you in advance, and I have found myself to be absolutely horrible at actually asking the list of questions I've prepared for guests, because we just get in here and start talking, and I get curious about random things. The one thing I do want to actually focus on remembering to ask the guest is, what have you found to be the most frustrating aspect of running a firm?
There's a number of frustrating aspects to running a firm. Uh, the one that's
The
probably
pause
most
was you trying to narrow down all of you can
that's
list
like,
as many as you want.
you know some of them are, I'll put them in different categories here. The one that is always going to be there, day in, day out, and is probably the most frustrating thing for me, and will continue to be the most frustrating thing even at my current firm, is billing. I the going through the billing process is not, like, you cannot get rid of it because it's very personal to each attorney. Um, and
Mhm.
you know, I I've seen a bunch of different, tactics, as far as, and I've tried a bunch of different things that work for me. If I didn't have to keep time, that would be a much happier life for me. But
Uh-huh.
that's how we have to bill. And so I would encourage
Yeah.
everyone, and this actually goes to rate setting as well.
Mhm.
Because what you're going to find is, you should keep track of every minute that you spend on something. and start there. That should
Right.
be that should be your status quo, and then adjust from there, right? Um, I'm at a point where I still try to do that, but then I end up writing down time sometimes. I think a lot of attorneys do write down time because, but ideally,
Hmm.
you want to be in a spot where the time you spent on it based on your hourly rate, you're like, man, that is a fair price for what I did. Like that's what
Yeah.
that's where you want to land. But you have to take into account all the factors being that some clients want you to be their therapist and they like to talk to you. Well,
Yeah.
that costs money and I'm going to have to charge you for it. Right. Some clients, they say, oh, this is a simple, whatever it is. And then you start unpacking and it's like, absolutely not. This is actually not simple. This is very
Yeah.
complex. And there's multiple
Right.
issues that I'm going to do you, the client, a disservice, um,
Right. That's right.
and potentially malpractice if I don't actually research these items for you. So,
Hmm.
you know, that's what's hard. It's hard to predict. That's typically why I do hourly rates over fixed fee transactions. And ultimately that's where, for me, still the most frustrating thing around our profession is billing and how we
I think
bill.
I think it's a really good practice tip to keep track of all your time. And, sometimes lawyers don't want to do that because they almost feel bashful about how long something takes them and they think they should have done it faster. But if at the end of your billable cycle, you look at the amount of time you spent on something and you feel like it's too much, start with that accurate picture and then you can give the client discounts from there. It's a really great client management tip to actually show your discounts on the bill as opposed to just not putting them on the bill in the first place. So definitely start with just
I
be honest, even if you think it's too hot.
I couldn't, Mark, I couldn't agree with that more. I early on, and I had some bigger clients, and I gave them, you know, discounted rates. I mean, like really good rates relative to what, to what I was charging. And what I did not do is like, there's different options within CRM systems, and we can talk a little bit about that. I think that those are beneficial,
Mhm.
but ultimately, um, there's different options to either show billable or not. And for new
Right.
people, they're coming in there, show everything because you want them
Yeah.
to pick up their bill and say, well, I would have had to pay $5,000, but I'm getting this
Yeah.
for 4,000. And even if they were a
Yep.
friend and friends and family, showing that discount is hugely
Yeah.
beneficial. And because they kind of like the difference between low bono and pro bono, they don't appreciate what they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely right. Okay, so dumb follow-up question time. What a, what is it about billing time that you find frustrating?
It's tedious, and I would say one, it's tedious for me, so I don't particularly like going through reading bills and doing that. Two, it's it's a non-productive activity, uh,
Hmm.
and I think that leads to a different thing. And I think it's important when people are looking at their firm to have an accurate prediction of this because I did. Um, but how many hours of work does it take to get one billable hour?
Right.
I think that that's a really important question that people should be asking, you know, themselves at various points in their career. And so, I mean, I can tell you right now that you know, I mean, I have to really think hard, but like I have to do a calculation to see how many hours do I actually spend working on
Hmm.
work versus um, actual billable hours, and because that's what gets you paid. That's what creates the
That's
living for
right.
you. And so you have
That's
to think
right.
about, whether it's client intake. whether it is client development, business
Right.
development, all that time, the time that you spent going to a conference, you're not billing during that
Mhm.
time,
Yeah.
but those are all hours
Yeah.
spent towards your business so how much does it take to actually get one billable hour? And that's different,
Right.
where you are in your career and how much time you spend doing other things. But it's also a frustrating component is it's a takeaway. So what I ended up doing eventually was hiring a bookkeeper, and they ended up doing a lot of the billing stuff for me and put me in a position to where all I had to do was review the bills.
Yeah. Nice. You got to enter the time, which I guess is probably still a source of frustration, right? Just entering the
Well,
time,
it
keeping
is,
track
but
of your time in tenths of an hour increments.
the other thing too is that I would, as far as that goes, enter it when you do it. Or at the very least, enter it at the end of the day, because if you don't, you will be leaving money on the table, guaranteed.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you remember in school, you might go to class and you think, I don't need to write down, I don't need to take too good of notes because I'm engaging with the material and I'm going to remember this, but then you don't actually remember it. It's the same way with trying to recapture your time at the end of the month. You're not going to remember what you did every hour of every day. Yeah, absolutely. That's a dangerous activity dangerous in the sense of you're robbing yourself of your own money. And you'll lose time if you wait till the end of the month to try to recapture everything. No question about it.
And
Sometimes if you're jotting it down.
right. Well, which kind of goes to, like, when it comes to billing management, there's a bunch of CRMs out there. I've used Clio. I've used MyCase. They're substantially similar. Everyone's got a sale or an upsell to whatever their program is. But and then my current firm uses something else. But ultimately, as an entrepreneur, both like Clio and MyCase are valuable tools. They seem pretty expensive up front, but they will pay off because they consolidate a lot of these menial sort of like busy work tasks, and they
Yeah.
add efficiency rather than having to like build your own systems, monitor something in a spreadsheet. They are,
Yeah.
I don't know, I found them to be very efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, this is the plug for, the sponsor of this podcast is Practiced, our case management software that we started and are marketing to other firms, which is all inclusive for $20 a month paid annually, by the way. But we have AI assistance to help with time billing. We have timers. We have enter it in like a sheet of notebook paper, quick ways to try to hack that system of living your life in 6-minute increments. So, we've really found that, like, especially for small firms, just efficiency is the name of the game for profitability. So, and speaking of that, where have you found over the years, especially when you were running your own firm, where did you find yourself to be losing the most time? Like, what activities were the biggest time vampires for you?
Managing other people in my firm.
Mm.
And that was, so I built my firm, and that eventually shrunk it down. And I think this kind of goes to the mentality of being, we want to be able to provide zealous representation to our clients and good service. Ultimately that is the goal of an attorney, right? That's your ethical obligation. But at the same time, we are here running law firms to make money. And so, it kind of goes to the overall efficiency. What does it take to get a billable hour, et cetera? Anytime that you are not billing, you are not making money. And so you have to decide what, are you okay with that profile of risk and your ability to put the work out there as maybe a single practitioner? The alternative is you need to find a way to be able to make money when you're not able to bill. And one of the few ways that we can do that as attorneys within a law practice is by having employees that are billing their time effectively
That's
on our
exactly
behalf.
right. Yeah.
So
I mean, and by the way, when you hire that first employee, people have had good experiences and bad experiences, but it is a pretty amazing feeling that first moment you realize you're making money without working. If you see some emails coming through and you're CC'd on it and you realize that somebody is billing and you're making money from it, and it's not you in that very moment, as the hamster running on the hamster wheel, it's kind of an amazing feeling. But there's a lot of danger to it. So tell us your experience, unpack it with growing and shrinking and how it costs you time and all of that.
so I've had, even before I was in my law firm, I managed employees, and within my law firm, I managed them. And the biggest thing is that, I was spending time helping somebody else achieve their goals. The problem is that it ended up, some of this is just management, I guess, experience. But when you want something more than the person wants something, you have to reevaluate and decide, well, this is probably just the wrong position for them. And ultimately trying to get to that, trying to figure out if somebody is actually in the right position or not as quickly as possible. Because if they're in the wrong position, then it's going to be a waste of money. So if that makes sense, I don't, long term, if your firm is not a fit for them and they need to be in a place that has either more structure or less structure or something different, you're not doing anyone any favors by keeping them around, yourself or them.
Yeah. I was just watching a CLE that said basically the same thing about clients, really, that it's about finding people who are a good fit for you. And this guy teaching the CLE said, go through your high school yearbook and think of all the people who didn't like you. And it's the same with potential clients. And you're just trying to find the people who would like you rather than wasting your time on the people who don't like you, which in my case was cheerleaders, is what he said in the CLE. It's a great CLE, by the way. I'm going to try to get this guy on the podcast. He's a pretty funny guy. But point is, it's the same with employees. And my tip for listeners on this is try to lean on self-selection. So in our job postings, we post on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, we try to infuse as much of our uniqueness and as much of our culture into that job posting as possible, because really our goal is for people who won't be a good fit to not even apply and only have people who would be a good fit with us. Like you mentioned, structure, autonomy, things like that. We want somebody to realize they're a good fit before they're even applying. That self-selection saves us a bunch of time in the selection process, but also a lot of headache in the management process as well. So that's a little tip for what you were mentioning there. And how did you find people, by the way?
I guess employees or clients or what?
Employees. Yeah. How did you find people to work at your firm?
It was all relationship based. That's going to be my answer for most of everything. But yeah, generally relationship based.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Then I know my answer to the next question. How did you get clients?
Again, it is relationship. Now, I think it's important to note that depending on practice areas, recruit clients differently, right? I know this because when I opened up my firm, I had a partner. His predominant practice area was criminal. So I if you're going to start a business, right, it's unlikely you're going to go to Google. You're going to call up your business buddy that you have a high opinion of and say, hey man, I'm going to start a business too. I think I might need a lawyer for this. Do you have anybody? Right. And then that person is going to recommend their lawyer, or they're going to say, well, I met this guy who I thought was interesting. You should try calling him.
Hmm.
Now, if you got wasted at a bar and ended up in jail and you're walking out of the bar, typically what you're going to do is you are going to go to Google and you'll be like, best DUI attorney in this area. All right.
Yeah.
And so what you'll see is, I mean, that's why PI attorneys have billboards. That is why,
Right.
if you were to even go and you're going to get calls from all sorts of groups that want to solicit you leads to your law firm. And the ones that, whether it's Google ads or whether it's leads that are harder to buy, it depends on the practice area, right?
Hmm.
And so the
Yeah.
areas where that are generally open, which are advertising for business on Google pay-per-click or whatever it is, they're going to be inexpensive, and there's usually going to be availability because it doesn't work that well, and it's not going to provide you what you want, except a
Uh-huh.
random call from somebody who thinks they're being investigated by the FBI, but really has a mental health issue, which I've had countless numbers of those calls when I used to do my own client intake, which is another issue that I think that, kind of goes to the time, kind of goes to everything, but
Mm.
find the areas that you want to spend your time. And a client intake is not typically useful for an attorney, and it's a great thing to hire somebody else to do for you. But because
Hmm.
they can filter out a lot of stuff, and it leaves you with more billable hours in your day, and less interruptions. But
Yeah,
the
I
but
agree.
but but again, it depends on the type of practice that you're gonna have, and uh, you know, Google ads and SEO. That's great for criminal defense. It's not quite as good for business. I don't advertise at all now, and I have more work than I know what to do with.
Hmm. Mm. Okay, so yeah. By the way, when I started, I went to that Colorado Bar Association Hanging Your Shingle CLE, which is like a 2-day program, maybe. And they brought in a marketing expert, I guess. I think it was from uh, Thomson Reuters, and they are experts at marketing to us to get them to pay money from our law firms. But anyway, they gave us marketing tips as a law firm, and they said what your website is really for is corroboration. So somebody hears your name from a friend or another attorney as a referral, they'll Google you to make sure you have a website and you're a legitimate going concern. But that's not how they will find you. And that was certainly the case for me. I would say first 5 years of the practice, I never got even one client from the internet. We get more now, but yeah, that was not a significant part of building our firm either, even for sort of like a tech forward type of firm. You're right. Like depending on your practice area, it just may not be how clients find you. So you found your clients through relationship building. You found people who worked for you through relationship building. That may come as second nature to you, but it's also possible that our listeners will hear that and think, that's great, but how do I do that?
That's a great question, and you know what I found is that clients, I mean, anybody can draft an agreement. So clients are what are they actually buying? They're buying you, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and they're buying whatever you are putting out there. And so if being outgoing to a degree, and if you want to sit there and do research all day, or write, you know I guess draft complaints or whatever it is, then maybe hanging your own shingle is not the best option for you, right? Because you actually have to go out and you have to network, and you have to build a group of people, that are going to want to spend their money and time with you. And so if that's, now as far as wanting to build that skill set, right? It all starts with putting yourself out there, right? And making sure that you have, conversations business cards is, what do they do is you hand them out and they go sit in somebody's drawer, but it is an excuse to talk to somebody, right?
Mm.
And it's an excuse to say, well, here's my contact information. Why don't you like? And it's always about the, you know, like it's always about the follow up, right? So the business card isn't going to do anything because it's just going to go into a drawer on somebody's desk, right? But especially these days, right? And then even with a digital business card, here, click, have my contact information. Follow up, go to lunch with these people, have coffee, build relationships, understand who they are, what they do, because that is the gold that is going to turn into the client, right? Because they want to, ultimately you have to figure out a way to where typically, whether it's a new client meeting or you're meeting someone on the streets or anything, you have about probably 30 seconds to be able to, one, create an initial impression and then potentially build trust, right? So my question is how can you create a good impression and build trust in between 30 seconds and 60 seconds, right? And all it is just enough to where the person would say, you know what, I would probably call that person.
Yeah. So what is the answer to that question? How do you build trust in 30 to 60 seconds?
That's a great question. I think it's different for everyone. And people are going to have, different ways about going and doing that. But, I always find being myself, is important, because if you are going to be a client of mine, you're going to end up spending a lot of time with me. And I don't want to be anything that I'm not. So, and kind of what you see is what you get. And that's just how I put myself out there.
Well, by the way, one of the best compliments I think you can get is receiving a referral from a former opposing counsel, because they know your work and they know what you're like in stress, and you must not have been such a horrible person to deal with, even on the other side of a deal or a lawsuit. Our firms have been adverse to each other probably a couple times, either on deals or litigation. And my compliment to you is I would absolutely refer a case to you. So tell us a little bit. Let's see. First of all, how people can find you. They can go to aegislaw.com, AEGISLAW.com. Is that the best way to reach out to you if somebody's listening to this and just needs to hire you to represent the business?
Of course. Aegis Law is the best way, or they can reach out on LinkedIn as well. I usually show up in the top results there for that, but either place is a place to reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect to lawyers, and just whether you're thinking about hanging out your own shingle or trying to figure out what's next. I love connecting with other people, because again, that's where business comes from. It comes from other lawyers. It comes from other business people, and rising tides raise all ships.
Okay, so close the loop for us. You ran your own firm. Now you're at a larger firm. Tell us about that decision-making process and how that all transpired for you.
So I built a firm. I was pretty content in kind of what had occurred and where we were. But I started, there were, I guess, just typical business issues that come up, issues between partners, and personalities. And so, ultimately I effectively downsized, and was doing that for another couple years, and it had to make a decision to say, you know what, I need to figure out a better way to run this thing. And I still think that there's a lot of good models out there. Aegis Law happens to have a very particular model that I'm comfortable with, which is, it's generally speaking an eat what you kill model, which running your own firm, I fit pretty well with that in that, but we do have a way to assign work, and I have enough work that I've developed as well to where I could hand it to younger attorneys, uh, and ultimately create revenue while I'm not working, and have a nice balance between both good billable hours. The other thing too is that if you were to go look at my resume, you say, you spent all this time in the corporate world, and I was sick of it for a long time. At the end of the day, my skill set really does lend itself to I am the most effective attorney that I can be when I am doing corporate work. And I love a lot of it. I don't love it all the time. But when you start comparing it to, doing a couple smaller transactions and an eviction and this and that, and I'm like, I like doing all that stuff, and it made me who I am as an attorney, and I still do those for those clients that need them. But at the end of the day, I have gotten to a point where I really needed to limit my practice, and I decided, at least at the time, I'm like, you know what, I don't want to rebuild my firm, and there's a nice model that fits me, and I'm happy to do that, and it's a good fit. That's just kind of what it boils down to.
Eat what you kill, or revenue sharing, is not a fit for everybody, but that's the model of our firm as well, and it's worked out well for us. I think it can be it can be a good way to grow a firm, and it's good for the attorneys as well if they're entrepreneurially minded. All right. Well, anything else any other golden advice you'd like to impart to people who are thinking about starting their own firm?
Find a mentor. I think that having, if you're a solo practicing attorney, at least having a handful of people that you can call and at least operate as sounding boards, that's a huge benefit. There was a number of people that I was able to do that with early on, and you can get lost in your head. Two attorneys can accomplish something in 30 minutes that might take me 3 hours by myself, and it's just a matter of just getting out of your head. And I think that's one thing I would say: build your network of kind of friends that you can run problems by and help problem solve with, and then offer them the same with no expectation of compensation. Just go out there, be a friend, be a good fellow attorney in this business. And if somebody's got a question, then do your best to give a good answer.
Andrew DiPaolo, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
All right. Thanks, Mark.